Increasingly, we are seeing nationwide a rapid increase in local property values in neighborhoods adjacent to increased transit investment. Some of the unintended consequences of this rise has been displacement pressures on longtime residents and business owners. How should local government, from your perspective, be prepared to deal with this potential situation?
Yeah, Oakland is ground zero for displacement threat. We have the fastest rising cost of housing relative to income of any city in America. So how do we protect against that? And it's a sad day when you have a whole neighborhood that is totally terrified of improved bus service. That is bad, and that is really what happened when we started the BRT project, this bus rapid transit project that really was intended to connect some of our communities that need opportunity most to opportunity in a cleaner, faster, more reliable, more affordable way. And yet they were terrified that this project would push them out of their neighborhoods. And so there's several things that we did do, are doing, and will do. One is we strengthen renter protections. We put it on our ballot last November. We greatly increased just cause eviction protections for tenants. We also changed the process by which we monitor what is a legal rent increase. California kind of restricts rent control, but we shifted the burden of proof from the tenant to the landlord. And then we re-engineered all of our online processes to make it a lot more user-friendly, human-centered design. We also have engaged in a strategy that you probably have heard of. We call them NOAAs, naturally occurring affordable housing. And we even went to our regional transportation agency and got them to set aside transportation dollars to not only help us support affordable housing development near transit, that we call TOAs, transit-oriented affordable housing, but specifically NOAAs. And again, traditionally when we think about our housing crisis, we say, all right, affordable housing developers, we need you to develop more affordable housing. The problem is that takes 5 to 7 years, and in California, our major source of funding, redevelopment, got taken away. And so we're really trying to go hard on acquiring, fixing up, and putting affordability protections onto existing housing that is currently occupied by our low-income, working-class families that are particularly at risk of displacement from these projects. So we were very intentional about that. The other interesting displacement that people are really worried about is displacement of kind of mom and pop, locally grown small businesses, especially businesses started by our immigrant community. And you know, another shout out, if you want to talk to someone who is so good at doing this, Chris Iglesias from the Unity Council is here. Wave, Chris. They are one of the most effective community development corporations in Oakland that have totally gotten this right. And we actually learned a lot of lessons about how they did a very ambitious development around our BART station, but did it in a way that was not going to displace the long-term immigrant merchants that were already there. And so we actually squoze out of the transportation project funding to do business support. We also have partnered with a nonprofit called Kiva.org, K-I-V-A. Has anyone ever made a microloan on Kiva? Well, Kiva is now coming to cities, and we partnered with them and intentionally deployed their outreach worker to the small mom and pop businesses along this bus route. And they deploy interest-free loans, zero interest, small, $5,000 to $10,000, because they are crowdsourced, but they don't require collateral or credit score or cash flow. And so we have a tremendous success story around our partnership with Kiva. More than 80% of the loans have gone to businesses owned by people of color. That is completely the opposite of SBA lending results. So those are some of the things that we've done to avoid displacement. And then I know you're going to ask us later about bond issues and going to the voters. We also got our voters to approve a new funding source for affordable housing that both prioritizes this acquisition strategy, but also will help fund new construction, because we do have to do both.
Great. So Pittsburgh's a little bit different. We were outside of the gentrification issue for, well, almost up until about 5 years ago. And we've started to now see the pressures building in specific neighborhoods. That doesn't mean that people left neighborhoods before, but the ones that left were mainly transient students and others that were living in predominantly white neighborhoods that were then moving into the neighborhood next door and helping to build that neighborhood, and then moving to the neighborhood next door and help building it. We didn't have the issue of families that had been long time established in a community being told their rent's going up beyond something that they couldn't afford, which is a different issue to deal with, especially when you're dealing with low income versus moderate, middle, or high income. It's a different mechanic that you have to look at. But what also makes Pittsburgh kind of unique in this is not only that we get to look at the experiences of cities like Oakland and Denver, but we also have areas of our city that are very cold markets where investment hasn't occurred in 50 years. And then you add on top of that, right now we have a need for 7,000 affordable housing units right now, and I have 17,000 vacant properties, blighted properties, empty lots. But there's no federal program that weds the two together to be able to allow small developers, nonprofit, faith-based institutions to work within the community to take a block of housing where I could just give them and then to be able to turn it into home ownership. The best way to end gentrification is to allow people to own their homes, and we have the capability of doing this. The other thing that we run into, again, it's the absolutism, that you gotta just invest in affordable, no more market rate. And we saw that happen in California, where the availability of market rate became more and more scarce, and the price went higher and higher, which then drove the low-income housing higher and higher as well. You have to have a two-track approach. You cannot starve off market demand and at the same time have an affordability plan, because all you're going to do is raise the cost of affordability as the cost of market goes through the roof. You've got to be able to allow market to happen and subsidize affordable and invest in affordable so it can happen at the same time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think everything that Mayors Peduto and Schaff have said. I also believe that you have to do some land banking in a real creative sense in communities that we're going in to improve, because you have to, as a city, be very intentional about rejecting the concept that it has to be either or. Either you improve it and displace, or you don't and you keep in place. You have to be very intentional about having a plan through every one of your departments, who have to be on tap, on base, have to be on target, and have to be connected and communicating with one another. Because it's also, you have to think about it in the context of just not one particular or two particular neighborhoods. You have to think about it in the context of your overall housing policy, because lack of affordable housing anywhere in the city is a threat to creation or triggering of a gentrification everywhere. And I'm gonna tell you something, the young people today have grown up in the most diverse, integrated society than any generation in our time. And they don't think twice about going into a neighborhood that some people see as undesirable and relocating. And it's amazing, because I love to talk to people. They'll send me a picture saying, see, here they are. And they'll show a young white girl with a dog walking down an all-black neighborhood. Well, this young lady went to school in a very integrated system. She doesn't think twice about where she relocates and where she calls home. And so they have a different mindset. They don't see themselves as gentrifying a neighborhood. They see themselves choosing a place they can afford to live. and this is where they've chosen to call home. So it's the reality that we have to think about how our overall housing policies impact gentrification. But land banking, investing in small businesses, the mom and pop shops, workforce development is huge. And that includes preparing those who live in neighborhoods that have been perennially overlooked and neglected to participate in the new economies that are around them. And also, if there's construction opportunities, to be prepared to compete for those opportunities as well. So first employment opportunities for those individuals. We can lift up neighborhoods and the individuals who live there. And then finally, Denver, or state of Colorado also has a tax rebate program for our most vulnerable populations, primarily our seniors, who are most at risk for displacement because of increased property values. And so they can have their property values, our taxes, rebated at the state level as well as on the local level.
Can I throw one last thing out too? Again, back to stupid government. We often are very well intentioned, and in California, we're really having kind of a come to Jesus moment about CEQA, which is the California Environmental Quality Act. It was very well intentioned. It was intended to protect the environment, but it's been used by communities that don't want affordable housing in their community. We call them the NIMBYs, not in my backyard, to kill projects. And it's made the cost of housing, including affordable housing, and the time really add to that cost. And so again, well-intentioned regulation that we are starting to recognize needs some reform because it's been abused.
Yeah, one last thing too, on affordable housing, there's no blanket approach. Right. Each city's different. Within each city, each neighborhood's different. Right. And you have to have a set of tools that helps each of them. So a lot of the cities are, I think, did Oakland do inclusionary zoning across the whole city?
We don't do inclusionary zoning, but we have an impact fee.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to pay the fee,
right.
you can build the unit. So
yes.
it's kind of, it was our
and that's what
backdoor,
Boston has as
our
well.
backdoor inclusionary.
And what we're looking at is doing it on a neighborhood basis and having the neighborhoods create interim planning overlay districts within the neighborhoods that are being affected. Because if we did it in the same neighborhoods where we can't get an investor even to go into to look at, we're adding another set of requirements upon them that will guarantee that it'll be another 50 years before housing will be developed there.
And when we implemented impact fees, we actually have 3 zones. One of the zones has no fees at all because that's, we want to incentivize more development.
That's the really important thing. There's no easy solution to this. If there were, everyone would be doing it.
Right.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Very complex issue.